the St. Augustine Record and my St. John's Sun. This is the Playbook, brought to you by the Sunset Grill, with your hosts Kevin Bassarat, Jonathan Bennett, and Justin Barney. Running the I formation with all the information you need on St. Johns County football.
Time for another edition of the Playbook in preparation for the playoffs.
The regular season's over, and 3 of our St. Johns County teams are hosting playoff games tonight. Justin Barney will have a little bit more on those games a little bit later in the show.
That's right, but first, let's finish up last week's scores. There were only 2, so this won't take very long. FSDB hosted St. Joseph's Academy, but St. Joseph's took that one in a big way, winning 21-6.
That's right, and Ridgeview traveled down to St. Augustine, where the Yellow Jackets won 42-7.
Our player of the week this week is St. Joseph's Eric Desmore. In their game against FSDB, Eric had 160 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, helping to lift St. Joseph's 21-6. As a matter of fact, for the season, Eric has had over 1,300 rushing yards and 19 touchdowns, which is good enough to give Eric the county rushing title. Now let's go down to St. Augustine and find out from Justin Barney what this week's playoff matchups will be.
Week 12 high school football, and really we should start off by saying it's week 1. Prep football playoffs, opening week. We've got 3 teams in town this week, 3 district champions, and 3 teams who have a legitimate shot of playing on to December in Orlando, site of the state championship game this season. We'll start first with Bartram Trail. They are playing host to Pensacola Pine Forest. Each of those teams 6-4. Bartram Trail making its 7th consecutive state playoff appearance. That's pretty impressive for Bartram Trail, which came into existence in the 2000 season, has been playing strong ever since. 7 straight for Bartram Trail. 45-10 win over Fletcher 2 weeks ago got Bartram this home playoff game. Playing a team that local fans may know well, Pensacola Pine Forest. They were a 3A team last year. They were actually a state runner-up in that classification. They beat St. Augustine last year 26-21 in the 3rd round of the state playoffs. So this team actually may be well known to county playoff fans. Down the road at Nice and Ponte Vedra Beach, the Panthers 9-1 coming off an off week last week, playing 8-2 Gainesville Eastside. Eastside's a little bit of hard luck this year. They've lost 2 games by a combined 12 points, but they have won 7 of 8 games entering this playoff game. Nice, this is their 3rd consecutive state playoff appearance under Coach Craig Howard. They have done it last year, state championship runner-up to Tampa Plant the year before. 13-2 season. Tim Tebow led them to a big win over Sefner Armwood in the state championship game, winning a day after St. Augustine High School won the state 3A title. So that brings us to St. Augustine, another good opening round game for the Jackets. St. Augustine 9-1. They host Jacksonville Reigns 7-3 on Friday night. Very good battle of 2 defensive teams here. St. Augustine's, they've forced 19 turnovers this season, led by Rashard Hall, safety. 6 interceptions, 2 of those he's taken back for touchdowns. The Reigns Vikings, 40 turnovers this year they've forced on defense, so that should be a very good clash of 2 very evenly matched teams. St. Augustine 18-7 in the playoffs under head coach Joey Wiles. In 12 seasons, this is the 9th consecutive state playoff berth for St. Augustine. Missed out last year, that loss to Pine Forest in the 3rd round. Year before, we all know what happened. 15-0, perfect season, ending in a state championship game and a big win over Sarasota Booker in that game in Miami. This year, venue has switched from Miami to Orlando, and St. Augustine has a good chance at being there in early December. So St. Augustine has averaged 42.3 points a game in their last 4 games of the regular season, and that's pretty impressive, although their defense is a little bit nicked up in this one, but I don't know if that's going to make much of a difference come Friday night. Back to you guys.
And for the part you look forward to every week, Justin Barney's Alumni Minute.
Prep football playoff time means we're getting to the end of the college football regular season, and that means alumni watch, another edition of checking in with guys who used to do it well in the county that are now doing it on the national stage. We'll start off by a guy who I've mentioned almost every week this season, Tim Tebow. Maybe the best game in Florida college football history. 7 touchdowns for the guy who used to play at Nice 2 years ago in a 51-31 win over South Carolina. He had 5 rushing touchdowns, 120 rushing yards. He passed for more than 300 yards and a couple touchdowns through the air. That gives him 42 touchdowns this season. That's high school numbers for Tim Tebow. And it's amazing. He is being mentioned in Heisman talk. He's being mentioned in NFL draft talk in a couple years. The guy is just lighting teams up. 7 touchdowns last week in that big win over South Carolina. And South Carolina had one of the top pass defenses in the nation. So Tim Tebow can do that against a team of that caliber. I mean, what's to stop him from doing it again in the NFL in a couple years? Brandon James, St. Augustine High School graduate. Big game again for the Florida Gators. Actually a career game for him in terms of total offense. He had 10 rushes. Big game in the backfield for Brandon James. 49 yards, had 3 catches for 37 yards, and also had 2 kickoff returns for 47 yards. So the most production for Brandon James as a Florida Gator. He got those types of touches in high school. He's never got that type of touches in terms of backfield touches, catching passes, and returning kicks. So good to see Brandon James doing that at the college level as well. Switching gears, going to the NAIA, Bartram Trail graduate George Smith, running back, sets a school record for McKendree College in a 35-0 win over Iowa Westland. George Smith, 206 rushing yards and a school record 4 touchdowns. In that game, he actually missed the school rushing record by a few yards. That's 213 yards, and he missed that one. But nonetheless, George Smith sets a school record with his 4 rushing touchdowns. George Smith doing it in the season finale for McKendree. And finally, Willie Cooper, a St. Augustine graduate, a dubious honor in a 48-0 loss for the Miami Hurricanes to Virginia last week. 48-0. That's one of the worst losses in Miami program history. But Willie Cooper, a safety for Miami, 8 tackles in that game. That was second on the team. We'll look forward to bringing you another edition of Alumni Watch next week.
And with that, we wrap up another edition of the Playbook here at sjcfootball.com.
Check out Jacksonville.com every Friday night for our live scoreboard. And on behalf of myself, Kevin Bassarab, that guy in St. Augustine, and Bill Bortsfield behind the camera, we'll see you next week on The Playbook.